Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2023 documentary Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story. Now, before I go any further sharing my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Corey, longtime friend of mine and follower of the channel, for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. Link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, the Robert Englund story, is a documentary that honestly I have been looking forward to for a long time. I remember when it was initially announced as Icon, the Robert Englund story, and I wasn't able to finance it through Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but it's a project that I was definitely aware of and definitely interested in seeing because I'm a big fan of Robert Englund. I'm not just a huge fan of Freddy Krueger. I also like a lot of Robert's work outside of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. The Mangler, his work in V, his brief role in Ford Fairlane, and a lot of the other stuff that he did as a supporting character actor. Even his work in television, like Nightmare Cafe. So I've been pretty enthusiastic about this documentary for a long time. And I remember seeing the trailer, looked good, and then it was finally released on home video recently. I actually pre-ordered it on Amazon when the pre-order initially dropped, and checked it out for this request. And for the most part, other than it leaving out a couple films, leaving out Nightmare Cafe, although I think Nightmare Cafe might be briefly mentioned in a special feature on the Blu-ray. But other than leaving out a few movies in terms of the discussion of Robert's career, I thought this was a fantastic documentary. I thought this was awesome. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was honestly my favorite film that I've seen this year so far. I liked it that much. And it's one of those things where this video might not wind up being that long, but that's because of the fact that it's a documentary. Like, it's not like it has a plot or anything. There's not really a lot of discussion to be had when it comes to that kind of stuff. And documentaries, when it comes to like the technical aspects, they're also kind of, just there. I mean, it's directed by the duo of Gary Smart and Christopher Griffiths, who worked on a lot of other documentaries, like Fright Night, the Fright Night documentary, You're So Cool, Brewster, as well as others. So yeah, Gary Smart and Christopher Griffiths directed it. Gary Smart and Christopher Griffiths and Eastwood Allen. A few other people, they were also producers. The film features cinematography by Richard Jackson. It's edited by Christopher Griffiths. It says written by Gary Smart, but documentaries don't technically usually have typical screenplays. It's structured around the interview. And they did a lengthy interview with Robert Englund and discussed his origins as an actor, discussed his childhood, and then discussed his rise to fame and his involvement in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, as well as other films that he was a part of and other shows like V and so on, or Stranger Things. And then they just combined them together into a loose narrative that was cut together with animations, which the animations are actually pretty good. I was surprised by how good the animations were. It added a nice little extra bit of charm to the documentary. And you can definitely tell it was a labor of love for everybody involved. They definitely had a lot of passion and genuine love for the project, as well as Robert. They wanted to do him justice, wanted to do the documentary about him justice, and it definitely does show. Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares, I would say it's not quite as good as You're So Cool, Brewster, but it's still a really solid, really high quality documentary about a talented and high quality man, by all intents and purposes, from what I've read, from what I've heard about Robert and his interactions with fans or his interactions with other people on other projects that he was a part of. He's just a professional and somebody who genuinely cares not only about his craft but about how he presents himself and the way that he's able to interact with other people in a positive way. He actually makes every interaction with the fan as personal as he possibly can because he actually cares. He cares about his interactions with fans. He wants to make them something special, and that just shows you how compassionate Robert is for his craft and for the people that love watching him do what he does. And it was really interesting to see Robert's backstory, to hear the stories about his childhood and his upbringing, and to see the stories of him acting on stage at an early age and getting the attention of a popular talk show host, and that culminating in him going to school for acting, and him talking about how his parents, in particular his father, was adamant about that. His father wasn't necessarily 100% behind him going to acting school and pursuing that as a career. He felt that Robert should just go on the same path that he did and be a lawyer, and acting wasn't going to pay the bills. And in reality, it didn't necessarily pay the bills consistently. He struggled at first. He did these workshops and he acted alongside all these up and coming actors and so on, but he didn't necessarily have this massive giant success. Like, he worked alongside guys like I think it was like, yeah, Bruce Boxleitner, William Catt, um, and became acquaintances with other actors that were trying to get work around the same time, like Mark Hamill. And yeah, he got these little bit roles in movies, like a Burt Reynolds film called Hustle, and a few other little character parts, like he was in Stay Hungry. He was also in a film called Big Wednesday, and he did the narration for that film as well. But it's not like he was getting huge, giant roles. And his first horror role was actually Eaten Alive, the Toby Hooper film. And even after that, it's not like he was a household name or anything, honestly considered a rising star. So he made his impact on the industry in a different way. He wound up going to an audition for Apocalypse Now because he was a big fan of Francis Ford Coppola, and he auditioned for the chef role, and they didn't think he was right for the part. But the people who were doing the auditions for Apocalypse Now mentioned that George Lucas was doing auditions and was doing stuff next door when it comes to trying to find people for Star Wars. And they recommended him to go over there, maybe do some headshots, do a few things. And so he did that for Han Solo, but they understandably didn't think he was right for that part either. But he saw some sides for Luke Skywalker while he was there, and he thought of his friend Mark Hamill, and he thought he would be a good fit for it. So then he took the sides with him and went back home, and Mark Hamill was visiting. Mark Hamill was there. I believe it was like a party of some sorts, And this is when Robert was like staying at places where there were multiple people that were living there. Like he even mentioned how, all these actor friends and I, like we'd be going from one girl's place to the next, just trying to make ends meet, just trying to keep a roof over our heads while we're doing our little acting stuff. Like we go months without a job, that kind of thing. And he was friends with Mark Hamill, and he let Mark know about the Star Wars role about Luke Skywalker, and he thought Mark would be good for it, and Mark agreed and called his agent, and the rest is history. So in some way, and honestly a pretty significant way, Robert Englund uh, helped Mark Hamill become Luke Skywalker. And there's this whole bit with William Catt, who I think was at one point up for the role of Luke Skywalker. And so there was like an interview with him, and he was like, "Oh man, I almost had it, And imagine things that would be interesting if things, were different. William Catt was Luke Skywalker, and Mark Hamill was the greatest American hero, that kind of thing. I know Willie Ames was also maybe considered at one point, but yeah, it's. I thought it was a pretty interesting bit of trivia. I don't really remember that. I remember hearing that. I know Marcus tried to say that, oh, that's not exactly what happened, and I don't really buy that Robert would be the type of guy to just lie for clout, especially at this point in his career. So I think the truth is closer to in between here. I do think Robert, had a part in Mark getting the role, but being the main and only part, probably not. That's probably not true. But being one of the people to let him know about it, yeah, sure. One of the people to help influence him in that direction, I think that's definitely true. And Robert also did some behind the scenes stuff, worked some odd jobs on different films. One of them was John Carpenter's Halloween. He actually worked on collecting leaves and just doing various sort of odd jobs for Carpenter around on the set, which I think is really cool. That he had some sort of uh, contribution to Halloween. And when he ultimately really started to become more well known in the mainstream was actually before he became Freddy Krueger, before he became the bastard son of 1,000 maniacs. It's when he was cast in the show V. The show V was a pretty big success for the network, got a lot of critical acclaim. It also helped him become more well known worldwide because V was a show that was shown all throughout the globe, and he played this role of this character that was more sympathetic. He was an alien, he was a visitor, but he connected with and related more with humans, and he actually became an ally for the humans. So he was a good guy, and he was cast because of this kind of goofy personality of his, and they felt that really did lend itself to this character and felt he would be a good fit, and they were right because it was a really good performance by Robert, and it definitely did put him on the map. And in a lot of ways, I think that's kind of what made him a viable casting choice to play Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street because he had a big television breakout success role in V. And a good chunk of this documentary is just Robert talking about his involvement with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, which is totally understandable. That's what he's the most well known for. That's his iconic role. And there's a lot of him just kind of discussing how he ultimately came to terms with him essentially being tied to Freddy so deeply, and how he realized after a certain amount of time that wasn't a curse, it was a blessing. And there's a lot of things about his performance as Freddy Krueger that are just so special because of the fact that Robert made it so uniquely his own. The fact that Robert himself is not really a creepy guy. Like he's a really nice, wholesome guy. Like he, for the most part, like yeah, he had his moments where he was partying a bit too hard at some point in his career, and there's some controversies here and there, but not really anything to the extent of him being a jerk to fans or a jerk to other co-stars or anything like that. Never let fame get to his head that much. He just seemed like, a guy who, for the most part, was just kind of a normal dude. Like he was cast as these kind of yokel characters early on in his career. These supporting character roles of these guys who were just normal guys, not anything really that larger than life. And I think that really lent itself well for him playing a larger than life horror icon like Freddy Krueger, because he was able to really embody that character in a way where he was having fun with it. He was having fun with it because it wasn't something that he was taking super seriously, like it was some serious uh uh role that he had to necessarily tap into some sort of dark part of himself. No, like he he actually utilized his irritation towards the younger stars of A Nightmare on Elm Street that were being obnoxious and annoying during the audition process, and used that as the fuel, and honestly as the ultimate creation of Freddy as a character, because Freddy is a child killer. So he just inserted himself into that in a way that was honestly kind of funny and kind of charming in its own way, where he's just like, "Oh, I hate these annoying kids. They're obnoxious. And I'm just gonna channel that into the role." And it just shows you how easily he was able to jump into it, and how he wasn't getting lost in it. So that's the other thing. Like I think a different actor might have gotten lost in the role too much, and in the process not been able to improvise, not be able to really have as much fun with the character that Robert ultimately did. And also it helped that Robert, like I said, he was the opposite of Freddy Krueger. So when he was able to play this character, he was able to tap into certain parts of himself that normally aren't there on the surface, and that enabled some really unique things to come across on the screen, that if you had a character actor who was already really well versed, already really well known for playing these kind of creepy roles, then maybe it just might seem like more of the same. But Robert, other than maybe like something like Eaten Alive, that really wasn't the case for him. So he was able to really provide something unique that surprised even himself as well as audiences. And that just made it so much more personal and all of his own. And you could see that when they were talking about Nightmare 2, and they were talking about how they were actually considering having a stunt double be Freddy. And then they saw the dailies and they were like, this sucks. We have to get Robert back. And they did. And it helped the film immensely. And in large part, that's the reason why it was a franchise to begin with, because Robert is just such a likable guy. So that's the other thing. Robert himself is such a likable, fun guy. There's just a certain charisma to him that just makes him very fun to watch. And without that, Freddy would just be not necessarily too scary, but it would just be a boring performance because it would just be very one note. And also, you wouldn't enjoy watching Freddy do what he does so much because you don't have that same charisma, you don't have that same likability. And they talk about that, how Freddy's a horrible person. Like, Freddy's a child killer. Freddy is an awful fucking person. And he's a nightmare. He's a living nightmare in so many different ways. And he kills people. But Robert plays the role with such enthusiasm that you can't help but love watching this villain. This just disgusting, despicable child killer uh do all of these various different things to these teenagers. And yeah, Robert just talks about Freddie and how Freddie became this big celebrity and became huge and big, how he uh ultimately got the jobs for 976 Evil and Family Opera because of the success of Freddy. How he was upset about how Family Opera was marketed because it was marketed too much like it was just another Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and he felt that hurt the movie. And I agree with that. I think that definitely did hurt the film when it comes to the marketing. He talks about 976 Evil and how it was a difficult project for him, and how it was a very short shoot, and there was a lot of different things going on. And he really mentions that the best thing about that film was him meeting his wife. I believe his wife is Nancy. I think his wife is Nancy, which is, when you think about it, like, isn't that kind of ironic, right? That Robert Englund, who plays, Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger, his wife is Nancy Englund. And she was a costume, like, I think she was like a set designer. She was a set designer for 976 Evil. And they fell in love and they hit it off. And when Nancy is talking about meeting Robert, and Robert's talking about meeting Nancy, it's really sweet and charming stuff. And speaking of Nancy, Nancy herself from the Nightmare on Elm Street films, Heather Langenkamp, is interviewed. She talks about her experiences with Robert, and there's just a bunch of different people involved with the franchise who discuss what it's like to work with Robert Englund, and they had nothing but nice things to say. In fact, Nancy's actor, Heather Langenkamp, she's talking about when her son died. Robert was there to console her, and that just shows you just how genuinely sweet and just kind and personable of a man he is. That one of the first things he did was just be there for his co-star and friend in Heather Langenkamp. He doesn't talk about Ford Fairlane though, which there's like footage from it in the movie, but there he never talks about it. So I'm guessing the interviewer never really asked him about it, which is too bad. There's brief mentions to some of the other stuff he did in the 90s, but no mention at all of stuff like Night Terrors, which I'm not surprised. I don't even know if Robert even has anything to say about that movie, other than that it was a bad film. Maybe, I don't know. Robert seems like the guy though that you know, he would talk about how it was fun to be shooting, in another country and so on, and work with Toby Hooper again. But yeah, that movie, let's just say it wasn't as good as it could have been, type sort of thing. He seems like the kind of guy who wouldn't like outright say something is bad or sucks because it's just not in his DNA. Um, but there's just a lot of stuff with Robert in this documentary that was just so much fun to watch. Like, just get an insight into his personality even more. Like, where he's talking about connecting with people that he's worked with, and they're all talking about these movies that they're a fan of, or Robert's talking about the poster for Dead and Buried and how he thinks it's one of the best posters ever. And I'm like, yeah, that poster is awesome. That's a very cool poster. Like, I agree with you, Robert, wholeheartedly. He discusses his time period in the 90s where, other than the occasional Freddy role, like a lot of stuff was just kind of drying up, and he was just doing roles to go overseas and get a paycheck and just keep working. It does seem like he really enjoyed working on the Mangler. It doesn't seem like that was an experience that he loathed or hated. In fact, the Mangler character in a lot of ways was based on, you know, a lot of things that he genuinely had passion for, which I thought was pretty cool. That he injected himself into the design and the creation of his character in the Mangler. Talks about his work in Urban Legend, how it was great to work with all of those different iconic cast members. Uh, there's a big portion of the film that is about 2001 Maniacs. Uh, there's also uh, parts of the movie that talk about some of the other stuff that he did in the 2000s, like this short that he did for I think it was for Shutter, or not Shutter. I think it was actually it was before Shutter was a thing. I think it was FearNet, and it was some short series of shorts, and talks about that. And there's some fun stories, especially from Steve Johnson, involving Robert's package. And he talks about his connection relationship with his father, and how it was pretty crazy that the first time that his father saw him on the set was on the set of Nightmare 4, or where he's like or was it Nightmare 4 or 5? It was one of those, and he was like up there and couldn't move. I think it was Nightmare 4, where he was just up there on this wall and couldn't move and was basically crucified. He talked about how awkward that was, that was his dad's first time seeing him perform. He talked about how his mom passed away before Freddy Krueger became this big icon, and stuff like that. Um, Continues to discuss more stuff about, his relationship with his wife and how that blossomed throughout the years. Talks about, the Freddy fans and the conventions and all of that, and his legacy as a movie star, and talked about how he, at one point in his life, he kind of forgot the young Robert, who was a fan of the Universal Monsters, who was a big fan of Lon Chaney and his makeup. And he looks back and he sees what his career has become and what he's gone on to do throughout his life. And it's like living a dream to him. And he just comes across so humble. And there are just a lot of things that he says that are just so wonderful and just make you love the guy even more. Like, I already really like Robert Englund as a person and as an actor. I mean, he's right up there with some of the actors that I wish someday I could meet in person, because he does seem like a guy who would listen to you. He would listen to you, he'd, laugh at your jokes, or, he wouldn't treat you like shit like some of these stars do, where they're catch them on a bad day, or they just don't want to be there, and they take it out on you. And that's not the case with Robert at all. And this documentary does a good job showing, how well-rounded of a person Robert is. And he even talks about the regret of Freddy versus Jason not turning out to be what he had hoped it would be. He wanted it to be Englund versus Hodder. That was one of the main reasons why he wanted to do the film, was for that reason alone. And just like Kane, he doesn't understand why Kane was let go. And that is still one of like the biggest missed opportunities in Hollywood, if you ask me, especially in horror Hollywood, like in horror history, because the fan base, they had been waiting for this battle, this clash for years. Like there were people getting tattoos and stuff, and people asking Robert about who would win at conventions for years. So it finally happens, and it's some guy named Ken Krisinger versus Robert Englund, because Ronnie Yu liked liked the idea of a taller Jason. Like, it's one of those things that just baffles the mind to think that the studio, New Line, or any of the producers would be like, okay, you're on Ronnie, you got it. You can have the taller guy, taller Jason. We're not gonna go with Kane, even though we said we were gonna go with Kane, and we told Kane that we were gonna have him in the movie. And that was the whole plan all this time, and that's what the fans want. But we're gonna go with what you want, Ronnie, because you did an all right job directing Bride of Chucky and it did some good business. So we're just gonna go with what you want. It's baffling to me that they just placated to Ronnie Yu so much. The studio should just put their foot down and been like, I don't, Ronnie, I get it. You have a vision. Kane Hodder is under contract. Kane Hodder is going to be Jason. End of story. No one else is going to be playing Jason Voorhees. And if you have a problem with that, well, then you can find another job, because we're not making this movie without Kane Hodder. They should have shown that commitment to him, and they didn't. Like, if something happened, they're like, oh, well, I don't know if I want Robert Englund. I want a different guy. They'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? What the hell are you smoking? Get the hell out of here with that shit. The only person that's playing Freddy Krueger in Freddy vs. Jason is Robert Englund. But they didn't have that same energy for Kane. But yeah, it was nice to see Kane talk about that. Nice to see Robert share that same bewilderment that Kane did when it comes to that particular film. But also, they mentioned how they had a bit of a clash in that Fear Net short, which is I haven't seen, and honestly, the first time I've heard of it, and I want to check it out now. Looks like it has some good practical effects, and you get a little clash between Robert and Kane. Like, I definitely got to check that out sometime. But yeah, kind of been rambling a little bit. But, that's just kind of how this is. Just a lot of random recollections from Robert about his career and his life, complete with clips from various different films and projects that he worked on throughout his career, with animations and transitions and stuff like that, and some, music that's reminiscent of A Nightmare on Elm Street, but isn't quite for copyright, that kind of thing. Uh, it's just a really nice trip down memory lane with Robert Englund when it comes to his career and his life. And it's a well made, well done documentary that is entertaining, intriguing, and fun to watch. It's like over 2 hours, and it went by really quick. So I can't recommend it enough, to be honest. If you like horror films, if you like documentaries, specifically if you're a big fan of Robert Englund, the only issues I have with it are very minor. Like I said, just didn't talk about a few films or a few different projects that he did. Other than that, like, I don't have anything that bad to say about the movie. I think it's that good. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Hollywood Dreams and Nightmares. Till next time, I'll see you later.